The crystalline chandeliers of House Valorian's grand hall cast prismatic light across the gathered elite of Xerion Prime. Ambassador Thane Valorian stood at the center of the opulent chamber, his tall, elegant frame draped in ceremonial robes that shimmered with threads of precious metals. His pale blue skin bore the intricate tattoos of his ancient lineage, each marking a testament to generations of diplomatic excellence. My fellow counselors, Thane's voice resonated through the hall. Tonight we celebrate not just the Harvest Festival, but the continued strength of our bloodlines and traditions. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd of Xerion nobility. Their elongated limbs and graceful movements spoke of evolutionary refinement, their large, luminous eyes reflecting centuries of intellectual superiority over the younger species of the galaxy. Kira Valorian watched from the marble staircase, her hands trembling as they rested on her still flat stomach. At 26 cycles old, she possessed her father's diplomatic grace and her mother's fierce intelligence. Her silver hair cascaded down her back in traditional braids, but tonight, the weight of her secret made every breath feel labored. She descended the stairs slowly, each step echoing in her mind like a countdown to chaos. The gathered nobles turned to acknowledge her presence. The daughter of one of the most powerful families in the Xerion Confederation, groomed from birth for political alliance and cultural preservation. Father, her voice cut through the gentle hum of conversation. I must speak with you, with all of you. Thane's expression shifted from pride to concern as he noted the tension in his daughter's posture. Kira, my dear, surely this can wait until... I'm pregnant. The words fell like a meteor into still water. Silence crashed over the assembly, followed by a wave of whispered shock. Kira's mother, Vera, stepped forward from her position beside the ambassador, her large eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and something that might have been fear. That's wonderful news, daughter, Thane said carefully, though his diplomatic training couldn't entirely mask his confusion. But why announce it so publicly? Surely you should have spoken with your intended first. There is no intended, Kira interrupted, her voice growing stronger. And the father is human. If the first revelation had been a meteor, this one was a supernova. Several nobles gasped audibly. Lady Senna, the matriarch of House Crimson, actually swayed on her feet. The very air seemed to thicken with scandal and outrage. Impossible, breathed Counselor Vex, his usually composed demeanor cracking. Surely you jest, child. Thane's face had gone ashen, his diplomatic mask finally slipping entirely. Kira, you cannot mean... Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Corps, she said, each word deliberate and clear. I met him 6 months ago during the Kepler mission. We fell in love. The phrase fell in love sparked a fresh wave of horrified murmurs. Love, as the Xerion elite understood it, was a primitive emotion. Useful for the lower castes, perhaps, but hardly appropriate for arranged political alliances. A human? Lady Senna's voice dripped with disgust. Those emotional creatures? They're barely evolved beyond their animal instincts. They're violent, added Counselor Vex, his tone growing heated. Unpredictable. Suitable for manual labor and military service, nothing more. How could you debase yourself? Enough! Kira's voice rang out with unexpected authority. Her eyes blazed with defiance as she faced the assembled nobility. You speak of humans as if you know them, but you only know your prejudices. Jake Morrison has more honor in his smallest finger than most of you have in your entire bloodlines. Vera moved closer to her daughter, her face pale but her stance protective. Kira, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Mother. I'm tired of Xerion secrets and whispered politics. Kira turned back to her father, her voice softening, slightly. I know this isn't what you planned for me. I know it threatens everything you've built. But I won't apologize for loving someone who showed me what true courage looks like. The memory flashed through her mind unbidden. Jake's strong hands as he helped her from the transport, his warm brown eyes crinkling with genuine humor as he made some irreverent comment about Xerion protocol. The way he'd looked at her not as a political asset or breeding stock, but as simply, Kira, You've doomed our family name, Thane whispered, his voice hollow. Our political alliances, our status was built on the assumption that we're superior to other species, Kira replied. But what if we're wrong? What if strength isn't about genetics or bloodlines? What if it's about character? She placed both hands protectively over her stomach. This child will be proof that love transcends species barriers, that the future doesn't have to be built on the prejudices of the past. The hall erupted in arguments, threats, and recriminations. But Kira stood unmoved at the center of the storm, her decision made. Jake was already en route to Xerion Prime, having received her message 3 days ago. Soon, they would see for themselves what humanity truly offered. Soon, everything would change. 6 months earlier, Kepler 442b. The frontier planet's twin suns cast amber light across the makeshift diplomatic compound as Kira reviewed the trade agreements for the 3rd time that morning. The month-long mission to establish mining rights had proven more complex than anticipated, requiring extended negotiations with the human colonial government. She heard boots on metal grating before she saw him. Lieutenant Jake Morrison ascending the stairs to the observation deck where she'd been working. At first glance, he seemed like every other human soldier. Compact frame, efficient movements, dark hair, cropped military short. But something in his easy confidence set him apart from the deferential escorts she was accustomed to. "Ma'am," he said, offering a casual salute that somehow managed to be both respectful and slightly irreverent. "Your father asked me to inform you that the afternoon session's been delayed. Seems Governor Chen's having transport issues." Kira set down her datapad, studying him with new interest. Most humans in her presence either cowered with fear or bristled with barely contained hostility. Jake did neither. "You don't seem particularly bothered by the delay, Lieutenant," she observed. His mouth quirked in what she would later learn was his signature half-smile. "Well, it gives me an excuse to enjoy this view a little longer." His eyes weren't on the planetary landscape when he said it. Heat crept up Kira's neck, an unfamiliar sensation. "That's quite forward of you." "My apologies," Jake said, though he didn't look particularly sorry. "I've been told I lack proper diplomatic restraint." Despite herself, Kira found her lips curving upward. "And what do you possess instead?" "Honesty. Mostly. Sometimes terrible timing." He gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I sit? Standing at attention gets old after a while." Kira nodded, intrigued by his casual manner. Most beings approached her with calculated deference. Every word weighed for political advantage. Jake simply talked. "Your people have an interesting relationship with directness," she said as he settled into the chair. "Very different from Xerion customs." "Yeah, I've noticed your folks prefer the scenic route to making a point." Jake's tone held no malice, just observation. "Must be exhausting keeping track of all those layers of meaning." "It's efficient," Kira replied automatically, then paused. "Usually, but not always." She considered the question, really considered it instead of offering the diplomatic non-answer her training demanded. "Sometimes I wonder if we spend so much time perfecting our words that we forget to make them mean something." Jake leaned back, studying her with those surprisingly perceptive brown eyes. "And what would you say if you weren't worried about perfection?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Kira felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of constraints she hadn't even realized were there. "I'd say this planet is beautiful," she said quietly. "I'd say I'm tired of pretending that everything can be reduced to trade agreements and political advantage. And I'd say..." She hesitated, then met his gaze directly. "I'd say you're not what I expected from a human soldier." "What did you expect?" "Brutality. Emotional instability. Limited intellectual capacity." The words felt harsh even as she spoke them. "I was taught that humans are primitive." Jake's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "And now? Now I'm beginning to think we might be the primitive ones." That evening, Jake found her on the same observation deck, watching Kepler's twin moons rise over the horizon. He carried 2 cups of something that smelled rich and unfamiliar. Coffee, he explained, offering her one. Human vice. Fair warning, it's an acquired taste. Kira accepted the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. Are all human vices so stimulating? Jake's laugh was low and warm. Lady, you have no idea. She sipped the coffee, making a face at the bitter flavor. It's awful. Yeah, but try another sip. She did, and found herself noticing the complexity beneath the initial harshness. Subtle notes of sweetness and earthiness that revealed themselves gradually. Better? Jake asked. Different, she admitted. Like many things about your species, I suspect. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moons paint silver paths across the settlement below. Kira found herself acutely aware of Jake's presence beside her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he held himself with relaxed alertness, the occasional glances he stole in her direction. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Shoot, why aren't you afraid of me, of my family's influence? Jake considered the question seriously. Because fear's a choice, and I've seen what it does to people. Makes them small, makes them cruel. He turned to face her fully. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Kira's breath caught. What? Someone who's tired of being put in a box. Someone who laughs when she thinks no one's listening. Someone who asks real questions instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. His voice grew softer. Someone beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with politics or bloodlines. Before she could respond, before her diplomatic training could reassert itself, Kira found herself moving closer. Jake met her halfway, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. This is impossible, she whispered against his lips. Most of the best things are, he murmured back. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, a question asked and answered in the space between heartbeats. But as Kira's arms wound around his neck and Jake pulled her closer, tentative became urgent, exploratory became desperate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kira rested her forehead against his. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Lucky for you, Jake said, his thumb tracing her cheek. I'm an excellent teacher. Above them, the alien stars wheeled in their courses, indifferent to the revolution beginning in 2 hearts that had found each other across the vastness of space and prejudice. The private chambers of House Valorian felt suffocating in the wake of the previous night's revelation. Kira sat rigidly in the ceremonial chair across from her father's imposing desk, her mother standing like a sentinel by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the capital city. The morning light cast harsh shadows across Ambassador Thane's face, aging him beyond his years. Explain to me, Thane said, his voice deadly calm, how my daughter, my heir, came to be carrying the offspring of a species we consider barely above livestock. Father, silence. His hand slammed against the desk, causing the crystal ornaments to chime ominously. Do you have any conception of what you've done? The Crimson Alliance was prepared to offer their eldest son in marriage. The Draconis Consortium had already begun preliminary negotiations. 20 years of careful diplomatic positioning destroyed in a single moment of, what? Rebellion? Lust? Kira's hands clenched in her lap. Love, Father. The word you're searching for is love. Vera turned from the window, her expression pained. Kira, darling, what you think you feel for this human is just infatuation, physical attraction. It will pass. The way your feelings for Father passed? Kira challenged. Or were your own parents equally dismissive when you chose him over the arranged marriage they'd planned? The comparison struck home. Vera's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Thane rose from his chair, beginning to pace behind the desk, a habit Kira remembered from her childhood when he was working through particularly complex negotiations. That was different, he said finally. Vera and I are of the same species, the same cultural understanding. Our union strengthened political bonds rather than severing them. He stopped pacing, fixing Kira with his most penetrating stare. Your Dalliance. Threatens everything we've built. Then perhaps what we've built is wrong. The words hung in the air like a blasphemy. Vera gasped softly and Thane's face went through several shades of outrage before settling on cold fury. Wrong? His voice dropped to a whisper. 5,000 years of Xerion civilization. Scientific advancement, cultural refinement, diplomatic excellence that has brought peace to 17 star systems. And you call it wrong? I call it incomplete. Kira stood, facing her father across the desk. Jake showed me strength without cruelty, loyalty without servitude, intelligence that doesn't require putting others down to validate itself. Her voice grew stronger with each word. He makes me want to be better, not just feel superior. Thane's laugh was bitter. Pretty words, daughter, but you speak from ignorance. This Jake Morrison, do you even know his background, his genetic lineage, his family's social standing? I know his character. I know his heart. Hearts are irrelevant in matters of state. Thane moved around the desk, looming over her with the full weight of his authority. You will terminate this pregnancy. You will accept the marriage proposal from House Crimson's heir. You will salvage what remains of our family's reputation and continue the bloodline properly. No. The simple word echoed in the chamber. Vera's hand flew to her throat, and Thane stepped back as if he'd been struck. I beg your pardon? I said no, father. I won't terminate my child. I won't marry someone I don't love, and I won't pretend that Xerion superiority is anything more than fear dressed up in pretty rhetoric. Thane's composure finally cracked completely. Then you are no daughter of mine. You will be stripped of your titles, removed from the succession, and banished from this house. Your name will be erased from our genealogical records. You will be nothing. The threat should have terrified her. 3 days ago it would have. But now, with Jake's child growing inside her and his voice echoing in her memory, Kira felt only pity for her father's limitations. If being nothing means being free to love who I choose, then I accept gladly. Vera stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Thane, please, she's our only child. She was our only child, he corrected coldly. Now she's merely a cautionary tale. Kira turned toward the door, then paused. Jake is coming here, father. He received my message 3 days ago. He'll arrive within the week. He won't be permitted to land. Then he'll find another way. That's what humans do. They find solutions where others see only obstacles. She looked back at her parents one final time. When he arrives, you'll see for yourself what I see in him. And perhaps you'll understand why I'm willing to sacrifice everything for something real. She left them standing in the chamber, her father rigid with fury, and her mother weeping silently by the window. In her private quarters, Kira activated the quantum communicator Jake had given her, a simple device that somehow managed to maintain contact across interstellar distances. His face appeared in the holographic display, relief flooding his features when he saw her. Kira, thank God. I was starting to worry when you didn't respond yesterday. I've been dealing with family matters. She managed a weak smile. How's your journey progressing? We'll reach Xerion space in 4 days. The diplomatic corps wasn't thrilled about my request for transport, but Captain Rodriguez pulled some strings. His expression grew serious. How bad was it when you told them? About as bad as we expected. Father's given me an ultimatum: abort the baby and accept an arranged marriage, or be disowned completely. Jake's jaw tightened. And your answer? I told him I'd rather be nothing than live a lie. She touched the screen, wishing she could feel his skin beneath her fingertips. I'm scared, Jake. Not of losing my family's approval, but of what they might do to prevent us from being together. Hey. His voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. No one, not your father, not the entire Xerion Confederation, is going to keep us apart. I love you, Kira. I love our child. And I'll fight anyone who tries to take that away from us. The certainty in his voice steadied her. This was why she'd fallen for him. Not just his strength, but his absolute commitment once he'd made a decision. 4 more days, she said. 4 more days, he confirmed. And then we face whatever comes next together. After the connection ended, Kira placed her hand over her stomach, feeling for the first time a flutter of movement. Their child, already, fighting to exist in a universe that would rather deny its possibility. Outside her window, Xerion Prime's 3 moons rose in perfect alignment, a phenomenon that occurred once every 7 years and was considered a portent of great change. Kira smiled. Despite everything, change was exactly what they needed. The orbital traffic control tower buzzed with nervous energy as the human diplomatic vessel requested landing clearance. Ambassador Thane stood at the observation deck's edge, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the sleek ship descend through Xerion Prime's atmosphere. "Sir?" Counselor Vex approached hesitantly. "The Port Authority is requesting instructions. Do we allow them to land?" Thane's expression remained stony. 4 days had passed since his confrontation with Kira, 4 days of political damage control as news of her scandal spread through the noble houses like wildfire. House Crimson had already withdrawn their marriage proposal. The Draconis Consortium had suspended trade negotiations pending clarification of House Valorian's commitment to traditional values. "Allow them to land," he said finally, "but assign them to the furthest bay from the diplomatic quarter, and double the security detail." "Yes, sir, and the, Lieutenant Morrison will be treated with the minimum courtesy required by interstellar law. Nothing more." 30 minutes later, Jake Morrison stepped off the human transport into the gleaming expanse of Xerion Prime's primary spaceport. The artificial gravity felt slightly different from Earth's, and the air carried an ozone-sharp scent that spoke of advanced atmospheric processors. But his attention was focused entirely on the delegation waiting to receive them. 3 Xerion officials stood in formal arrangement, 2 flanking a central figure who could only be Kira's father. Ambassador Thane Valorian was taller than Jake. Had expected, his pale blue skin marked with the intricate tattoos of high rank. His luminous eyes studied Jake with undisguised disdain. "Lieutenant Morrison." Thane's voice carried the frost of deep space. "I am Ambassador Valorian. You will accompany us to House Valorian for discussions. With respect, sir, I'd like to see Kira first. You will see her when I deem it appropriate, not before." The journey through the capital city revealed a civilization of stunning beauty and rigid order. Crystalline spires reached toward the sky in perfect mathematical harmony, while automated transport systems moved citizens with clockwork precision. Everything Jake saw spoke of a society that had achieved technical mastery at the cost of human, or in this case, Xerion, warmth. House Valorian's estate sprawled across several acres of manicured gardens and architectural wonders. Jake was escorted through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, each one seeming to judge his unworthiness with their painted eyes. In the main receiving hall, Jake found himself facing not just Ambassador Thane, but a gathering of Xerion nobility that included several individuals whose names he recognized from Kira's descriptions: Lady Senna of House Crimson, Counselor Vex, and others whose obvious wealth and status radiated disapproval. "Lieutenant Morrison," Thane began formally, "you stand accused of corrupting my daughter and threatening the stability of our ancient bloodlines. What do you have to say for yourself?" Jake had prepared for this moment during the 4-day journey, but facing the assembled power of Xerion society, he realized that no amount of preparation could have readied him for the sheer weight of their collective contempt. "I love your daughter, sir, and she loves me. Everything else is secondary to that." Lady Senna made a sound of disgust. "Love, as if that primitive emotion could justify such debasement. With respect, my lady, love isn't primitive, it's revolutionary." Jake turned to address the entire assembly. "Your society has achieved incredible things, I won't deny that. Your technology, your architecture, your art, all magnificent. But what good is any of it if it can't make room for 2 people who care about each other? You speak of revolution?" Counselor Vex stepped forward, his voice sharp with indignation. "You're nothing but a soldier, a military grunt from a species that's barely left its home system. What could you possibly offer someone of Kira's standing?" Before Jake could respond, the hall's massive doors swung open. Kira entered like a force, of nature, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes blazing with defiance. She wore a simple dress that did nothing to hide the slight curve of her belly, a visual reminder of what was at stake. "He offers me honesty," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "He offers me respect without submission. He offers me love without conditions." She moved to Jake's side, taking his hand in full view of the assembly. "Most importantly, he offers me a future where worth is measured by character, not genetics." Jake squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. "I know I'm not what you planned for her. I know I can't offer political alliances or ancient bloodlines, but I can offer something your system apparently can't: the freedom to choose her own path." Ambassador Thane's face had gone white with rage. "Enough! This farce ends now. Guards, escort this human off my property and bar him from—" His words were cut off by the sharp whine of energy weapons. Armed figures in dark clothing burst through the hall's side entrances, their faces hidden behind tactical masks. House Draconis colors gleamed on their armor. "Nobody move!" The lead attacker's voice was distorted by his mask's vocal modulator. "Ambassador Valorian, you've been judged guilty of weakening Xerion purity through your daughter's actions. The sentence is death." Chaos erupted. The assembled nobles scattered, some diving behind furniture while others tried to flee toward the exits. The attackers moved with military precision, cutting off escape routes while keeping their weapons trained on Thane. Jake's combat instincts kicked in instantly. While everyone else was frozen in shock or fleeing in panic, he was already moving. Years of military training had taught him to read tactical situations instantly. The attackers' positioning, their weapons capabilities, their likely plan of attack. "Kira, get down." He shoved her behind a marble pillar just as energy bolts began flying. The attackers had expected panic and confusion, not resistance. They certainly hadn't expected a human soldier trained in close-quarters combat. Jake rolled behind an ornamental fountain, drawing the sidearm he'd been permitted to carry as part of the diplomatic escort. The attackers' formation was textbook, perfect for fighting other Xerions. But they'd never faced someone trained in human military tactics. Using the fountain as cover, Jake flanked left while the attackers focused on the main floor. He came up behind their position just as the leader was taking aim at Ambassador Thane. "Drop your weapons." The attackers spun toward him, but Jake was already in motion. His first shot disabled the leader's weapon. His second sent another attacker, diving for cover. The third attacker managed to get a shot off, but Jake was no longer where he'd been standing. In the space of 30 seconds, 3 highly trained assassins found themselves outmaneuvered by a single human. The leader, his weapon destroyed and his tactical advantage lost, began reaching for a backup weapon. "I wouldn't," Jake said quietly, his own weapon steady in his hands. "Your friends are smart enough to know when they're beaten. Question is whether you are." The remaining attackers looked at their leader, then at Jake, then slowly raised their hands in surrender. As Xerion security forces finally arrived to secure the scene, Ambassador Thane stood amid the debris of his shattered hall, staring at the human who had just saved his life. The man he'd dismissed as primitive and worthless had displayed tactical brilliance, physical courage, and split-second decision-making that had probably saved dozens of lives. Kira emerged from behind the pillar, her eyes bright with tears of relief and pride. She ran to Jake, throwing her arms around him as he holstered his weapon. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. "I'm fine," she whispered against his chest. "You saved him. You saved all of us." Jake looked over her head at Ambassador Thane, who was slowly approaching them. The older Xerion's expression was unreadable, but something had shifted in his luminous eyes. "Lieutenant Morrison," Thane said formally, "it appears I owe you a debt." "You don't owe me anything, sir," Jake replied. "I was just doing what anyone would do." "No," Thane said quietly, his gaze taking in the tactical precision of Jake's actions, the protective way he held Kira, the complete absence of smugness or self-congratulation. "You were doing what a good man would do. Perhaps it's time I reconsidered what strength truly means." 3 months had passed since the assassination attempt that changed everything. The rebuilt Great Hall of House Valorian now buzzed with a different kind of energy, not the cold calculation of political maneuvering, but the warm chaos of wedding preparations. Ambassador Thane stood at the main window of his private study, watching his daughter direct the placement of both Xerion crystal formations and earth flowers in the garden below. The sight still amazed him. Kira, visibly pregnant, now moving between human and Xerion traditions with equal grace, creating something entirely new from the synthesis of both cultures. Having second thoughts? Vera asked as she entered the study, carrying 2 cups of the earth beverage Jake had introduced to their household. Coffee, Thane had discovered, was indeed an acquired taste, one he was still acquiring. About the, wedding? No. Thane accepted the cup gratefully. About my own blindness constantly. In the months following the attack, Jake had become a regular presence at House Valorian. What had begun as protective detail during the investigation had evolved into something neither man had expected: genuine friendship. Jake's tactical expertise had proven invaluable in reorganizing the estate's security, but more importantly, his perspective had begun to challenge assumptions Thane had held for decades. The Draconis Consortium's trial concluded yesterday, Vera said, settling into her chair. Life imprisonment for all involved in the assassination plot. Justice served. Thane's expression hardened briefly. Though I suspect their real motivation wasn't preserving Xerion purity so much as eliminating a political rival. Using our daughter's choices as justification, yes. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Which makes me wonder how many other pure Xerion traditions are really just convenient excuses for maintaining power. Through the window, they watched Jake approach Kira with what appeared to be a bouquet of earth roses. Even from this distance, Thane could see his daughter's face light up with joy. The sight no longer caused him pain, quite the opposite. He makes her happy, Vera observed unnecessarily. He makes her brave, Thane corrected. She was always happy in her way, but with him she's become herself. The person she was meant to be, rather than the person we tried to shape her into. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. The holographic display showed Captain Rodriguez of the Human Diplomatic Corps, her expression formally pleasant. Ambassador Valorian, I'm calling to confirm the arrangements for tomorrow's ceremony. The Terran delegation has arrived safely, and we've coordinated with your security team for the integrated proceedings. Excellent, Captain. Please convey my gratitude to Earth's Diplomatic Corps for their cooperation in this, unprecedented situation. Rodriguez's smile became more genuine. Sir, if I may speak freely, what you're doing here, hosting an interspecies wedding, publicly acknowledging the union, it's going to have repercussions throughout the galaxy. You're going to inspire a lot of people who thought love had to conform to species boundaries. After the call ended, Thane reflected on the captain's words. When he'd first agreed to the wedding, it had been primarily to avoid losing his daughter entirely. But as the arrangements progressed, he'd begun to see the broader implications of what they were creating. Not just a marriage, but a symbol of possibility. That evening, the traditional pre-wedding gathering brought together families from 2 different worlds in the restored Great Hall. Human military personnel mingled with Xerion nobility, sharing stories and discovering common ground. In unexpected places, Jake's parents, simple farming folk from Earth's North American continent, found themselves deep in conversation with Lady Senna about agricultural techniques that crossed species lines. Kira moved through the crowd like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. At 7 months pregnant, she radiated a contentment that Thane had never seen in her before. Dad, she said, appearing at his elbow with that particular grace she'd possessed since childhood. Jake's father wants to thank you personally for accepting us. Thane looked across the room at William Morrison, a weathered man whose hands spoke of decades of honest labor, whose eyes held the same steady integrity Thane had learned to recognize in his son. He should be thanking me, Thane murmured. His son saved my life, and more importantly, he gave my daughter something I never could. What's that? the freedom to choose her own definition of strength. The wedding ceremony itself took place at dawn, when Xerion Prime's 3 moons were still visible against the lightening sky. The setting honored both traditions, a Xerion crystal circle for eternal commitment, surrounded by earth flowers for new growth and possibility. Kira wore a gown that blended Xerion formal elements with human bridal traditions, her silver hair, adorned with both crystal formations and delicate white blossoms. Jake stood waiting in his dress uniform, but with Xerion ceremonial bands around his wrists, symbols of his acceptance into their culture. The ceremony itself was a marvel of cultural synthesis. Thane performed the Xerion bonding ritual, while Jake's military chaplain offered the human wedding vows. When they reached the moment for exchanging promises, Kira and Jake spoke not in either traditional language, but in words they had written, together. "I promise to love you not despite our differences but because of them," Kira said, her voice carrying clearly in the dawn air, "to build something new from the best of both our worlds, to raise our children to see strength in diversity and beauty in unexpected places." "I promise to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me," Jake replied, his hand steady as he placed the ring on her finger. "To stand beside you as we prove that love doesn't recognize species boundaries. To be the father our children deserve and the partner you need, no matter what the galaxy throws at us." When they kissed, sealing their union, the assembled crowd erupted in celebration that mixed human applause with Xerion harmonic chanting. Above them, the dawn light caught the crystal formations and threw rainbows across the garden, a fitting symbol for the new spectrum of possibilities they represented. The reception continued well into the afternoon, with both cultures sharing food, music, and stories. Thane found himself in conversation with Jake's military colleagues, learning about human concepts of honor and duty that weren't so different from Xerion ideals. As evening approached, Kira and Jake prepared to depart for their honeymoon, a tour of 3 different worlds where interspecies cooperation had created something beautiful. But first they had a private moment with their families. "Thank you," Kira said to her father, embracing him carefully around her pregnant belly, "for being brave enough to change your mind." "Thank you," Thane replied, "for being brave enough to show me what I was missing." Jake shook hands with his new father-in-law, the gesture carrying weight neither man could have imagined months earlier. "Take care of her," Thane said quietly. "Always," Jake promised. "And sir, thank you for trusting me with the most precious thing in your world." Later that night, in their new quarters aboard the honeymoon transport, Kira lay in Jake's arms as the ship carried them toward their first destination. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling their child move restlessly beneath her palm. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked softly. "All of this, the publicity, the symbolism, making our love into a political statement?" Jake's arms tightened around her. "I think we did the only thing we could do. We chose to be honest about what we feel, and let the rest of the galaxy decide how to react. And our child, growing up as a symbol of interspecies cooperation? Our child," Jake said firmly, "will grow up knowing that love is stronger than prejudice. That courage means choosing what's right over what's easy, and that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to let other people's limitations become your own." Kira smiled against his chest, feeling the gentle vibration of his voice as he spoke. Through the viewport, unfamiliar stars wheeled past, suns that would illuminate worlds where other couples might look at their example and find the courage to follow their own hearts across the boundaries of species and tradition. Their child kicked again, as if eager to be born into this new galaxy of expanded possibilities. Kira closed her eyes, imagining a future where the question wouldn't be whether love could bridge the gap between species, but how many other impossible things might become possible once people stopped accepting that impossible was a permanent condition. In her dreams that night, she saw children of every species playing together in gardens where earth flowers grew alongside Xerion crystals, their laughter echoing across a galaxy where strength was measured not by the purity of bloodlines, but by the courage to love beyond boundaries.